All right, welcome everyone. This is a maintenance video on the new 2020 Daiwa Tatula SV. I'm going to break it apart. I'm going to show you guys the internals and just do a few different maintenance tips to help keep your reel performing well. It's been a great performing reel for me so far, and I want to keep it that way. So proper maintenance is the way to do it. So if you want to see more fishing with the Tatula and also just general fishing tips, subscribe down below and also comment what you want to see. I'm going to be doing a lot of different things this summer, so I want to make sure that I'm doing stuff that you guys want to see. So let's get right to it. All right, the grease I'm going to be using, this is Cal's Universal Reel Grease. It's not super high-end grease, but it's pretty good, and it's cheap. It's readily available. I like it. And this oil. I'll be using this for the bearings and the worm gear. This is just the oil that comes with the most Daiwa reels. And rubbing alcohol, that's for the bearings. That's to get all the factory oil out of there, so I can keep it performing tip-top. So I'm going to break into it right now. So the first thing you do, you're going to take off this handle nut retainer. That's this plastic part that's right here with the screw. So you just use a screwdriver here. Usually comes out pretty easy. And what I do, I put all my stuff in an order up top. That just comes off like that. I just put it there, and I just kind of go all the way across like this. So that way I know which order all the parts came off in. Now this is going to be 10mm right here. I like using one of these screwdriver socket looking things. And it's going to be reverse threaded, being left-handed. That comes off, goes in that same pile. Now you're going to have to hold the drag star down like this to take the handle off, because there's a spring underneath here. Gently let up on that. And keep in mind there is a small washer that's on the back side of that handle. And screw. Now you put your thumb on the spool right here. It kind of helps take this off. There'll be a washer that's usually connected to it with grease. Right here, this. I just like to keep it connected there if I can. It's one less part to move in the carpet. This is what makes your drag click right here. There's two washers that are in there. They're going to be like kind of beveled like Pringles chips kind of. And those just have to be opposite. It doesn't matter which way they go back in. This little thin one usually goes on top of your drive shaft bearing right here. So now all the bolts, all the nuts and stuff are off of here. So now you're gonna have these three bolts right there. Now I'm not sure with the Tatula, but these might be different sizes. So what I do, when I hold it like this where I can read the reel like this, I put the top one on top, and I'll put this one here and this one here. That way I know which way they. And when you get to your last screw, hold the side plate on, because this is what you can lose the yoke springs. I'll show you what those are in a little bit. Alright, all of the screws are off. So now just very gently wiggle the side plate up. And that's it right there. It's not honeycombed. The 2017 has like some honeycomb stuff in there. Now, the reel's not super dry. It has some grease on it. A lot of times, it seems like Daiwa reels kind of come dry from the factory. Now, underneath here, just remember this this order that the drag stack goes in. It'll also be on your schematics. I'll set this aside. Now, I'm not going to do a whole bunch of crazy stuff to this reel. I'm just going to add a little bit of grease to it and call it good. These are the number one things that you'll probably lose if you're not careful. I am going to be cleaning these gears off. So that this is ready to go to get cleaned. So is this. This is your pinion gear. So now I'm going to take the bearings out, give them a little soak. So I just use my nail. You can use a nickel or something. I just undo the screw here. And once you undo it with your nail, it's pretty easy. You don't have to screw this thing back super tight. Just get it snug. Side plate you push forward, wiggle it off. There's a spool bearing. There's no spool bearing on here. The other one is going to be inside of here. So you just have to use a little screwdriver to take that off. It's okay if you bend it. You could always just bend it right back. You could take this line is a mess right now. You can always take your tension knob off, but what you can do is just use the tip of your spool. So now what I'm going to do, this is that rubbing alcohol. I'm going to drop that one in there. Take off this one. Keep your thumb on here. See, there's already there's like grease in there. I don't know how grease ends up inside the bearings, but it's good for longevity and saltwater. Not good if you're trying to get max performance. So what I do, I put my thumb on top of the clip, and it's good to go. And a lot of times what I'll do, just so I make sure I don't lose it, you have your brake magnets. It just sits right in the brake magnets. Pretty good. Again, just use your spool. There we go. Yeah, there's definitely a little bit of grease on there. There's some oil, but there's also grease that made its way in there. I'm just going to put that in here. Give it just a little move around, let it soak for a little bit, and now we'll go back to the main gears. Alright, so the first thing I do, I wipe off all this extra grease here. Just with a dry rag. Kind of roll it around the gears a little bit. And what I got here, this is a solution of hot water, some Dawn dish soap. This is a cheap way to do it at home. You could have like degreasers and stuff like that. Grab my toothbrush here. And I push it against the side like this. Let me move this over here. So I push it against the side. And I ease it down. That way you're not going to bang up the gears at all. Give it a little stir. And only do one gear at a time. So now that one's sitting, pinion gear is just waiting to be serviced. So generally at this time what I would do is I would take off like the worm gear. I'd clean that all out, everything like that. There's a bearing underneath here or a bushing. I'd clean that out, but see how it's brand new reel and it feels pretty good out of the box. I'm not going to dig around and mess around with that too much. So I might just add a little bit of grease here and call it good. If I can find the grease. Oh, there it is. So you just use like your same screwdriver, you can use a toothpick, whatever you want. And just adding a little tiny bit. You don't have to add a whole bunch. And it'll all get worked in. Just twist it a few times. See how this gear is bigger than this gear? They're gonna rotate at different, definitely at different speeds. So it'll eventually get all worked in all the gears. And I kind of put my finger up on top of here just to redistribute some of the grease back into the teeth. That'll probably be good for now. All right, now let's check on our main gear here. I'm gonna scoop it up just very gently. Just give it a little tiny wipe with the toothbrush. And then I'm going to give it another little dip. And then I pick it up again. Do the same exact thing. Now what I'm going to do is just wipe it off real quick. And I will rinse these with hot water as well. Put that over by the bearing. Same thing here. Just going to ease it down into that solution. To mix the stuff around. I don't want those brass teeth banging into the glass too much. Then what you can do with these parts, wipe them down too. You can clean these in that solution, or you could just wipe them down. This is just a quick little way to do it. If I want to take more time, I would, soak things. I'd probably replace some stuff, but all right, now this has been soaking for a few minutes. I'm going to take this out. And you don't want to get any grease inside here. This is like inside the hole right there. That's where your spool shaft goes. So grease is just going to slow down your spool. So you have to be real careful when you put grease onto your pinion gear. Do a second little scrub. Now these gears aren't too dirty, so I don't have to worry about sitting there scrubbing it a whole bunch. And just kind of dry some of that up. Then I'll rinse that in warm water here shortly. Alright, so I've been soaking these for a little bit, these bearings. And dab out some of the extra. Put on the spool shaft. Just give it a few rotations. Then just drop it back in. And grab the other one. I'm going to do the same thing. That allows the rubbing alcohol to get a little bit more work. Alright, so now I am going to let it sit for a little bit and do it one more time. Alright, I've been letting them sit for a little bit. I am going to wipe this off real quick. I just used a little bit of that alcohol, wiped it off on this towel. I kind of use, I put my mouth right by it and I just use it as a, kind of like an air gun. If you have an air gun, you can use that too. And I'll rinse these off with some warm water as well, just to get, because there's little like particles that can be stuck inside the alcohol. So I will leave these aside and I'll get back to the gears. So I just got back with rinsing all my parts. So I just kind of drive the main gear, just so the fibers of the towel can kind of dry out in between the teeth. I'll set that aside. And then the bearings. The bearings take a little bit longer to dry, just because they're completely sealed. I'm just blowing on the back. I'm getting some of that water out. I'm gonna have to sit there and I'm gonna have to let those dry for a little bit longer. A lot of times I'll just kind of push them into the towel and it kind of helps leach some of the moisture out. All right, so now you grab a different toothbrush. You get a bunch of the cheap dentist ones. That's what this one is here. So first thing I do is make sure that you line up the, so you have like so you have this slant right here. You have one on each side. You want to make sure that that lines up with right here. Just put it down here. Okay, it lines up on there. So if you put that on upside down, and then you put your reel together and you start turning your handle, it causes a lot of problems because your gears won't be aligned and you start meshing them, and it would be not good news. You end up having to buy a new gear set. So I put a little tiny bit of grease on here. I just put a small little amount on this bottom part here. Only time these teeth are used is when you're re-engaging your spool. And I make sure I don't get any down by these slots, because if the grease gets down onto your spool shaft, then it's going to slow your spool down and limit your casting performance. Just put a little bit there, and some will naturally get down there too, just from going back and forth on your main gear. Get a little tiny bit more. You don't want to put too much grease on your gears. But that'll be enough to get started. So now, the way that you configured it has to go back together. Just like that. You take your yoke springs. It's nice to have a little bit of grease on these posts here. It helps keep your the springs in place. All right, now the next thing, we're going to put our main gear stack back together. So first thing is this washer right here. Looks like a saw blade kind of. It's keyed, so it goes in. It goes in. So next thing we're gonna do, we're gonna put our main gear stack back together. So this saw blade looking washer here. This goes down. You do have to twist your spool shaft to get it on there. So these blades, how they are like that, has to catch on this thing. That's what engages your spool. Like after you cast and you go to reel again, this pushes that thing back over, and that's how you're able to reel. So make sure that you have it, the points facing this way, so this will actually line up. I'm not going to do it right now, but you can push it over and it'll line up, because you can actually take the, like when you engage when you push your thumb bar down, this actually slides over, and you twist your handle, and that's how it pushes your thumb bar back up. I'm not going to do that right now because these springs will end up flying. So, but make sure that your points kind of go toward your pinion gear like this. So next thing, you have this red washer. I'm just going to get a tiny little bit of grease and put it on here, just enough to kind of make sure there's grease on there, not too much. You don't want it to get tacky. All right. So next is the actual main gear. So I like to, with my greasy fingers, I touch the back of this a little bit. I don't get a ton of grease on it because you already got grease there. And be careful when you're meshing these two gears back together. And don't rotate your handle or anything like that without it being together, because you could chip away at your teeth a little bit. Next to your drag washer, I'll add a little bit of grease to this. It was probably fine how it was. The drag did feel pretty good. I'll just add a little bit. Basically what grease does on your, make sure you're using grease that can go on your drag, like this Cal's grease. But what that does, it makes it a little bit smoother, but it takes away from your overall gear pressure. So if you're going to be flipping with this reel or using frogs or whatever, make sure you don't put grease on there. And then I just rub my grease fingers all over this, just get a little thin layer, because you already have some on the drag washer. Put that down. That's all sandwiched up. So now we have to put a little bit of grease on our gears. Let's take a little bit. I just, not all over the place, I just dab it in there, make sure I get it between the teeth. A few different spots. I don't know where all this fuzz is coming from. And separate the drag wash. Just kind of pull it to the side a little bit. Like, just pull these things to the side. Can't talk right now. And that way they're not touching when you're applying new grease. Oh, I just got some grease inside there. All right, so it's got grease all on it now. I'm not going to work the grease in right now because I want to make sure that those gears are aligned before I start playing with them. So now this is when you start putting the reel back together. So grab your... Oh, I like to wipe my hands off right now, just so you don't get grease all over the... I put a little bit of this rubbing alcohol on my fingers just to wipe the rest of that grease off. Just wipe it off with a rag. That's going to help getting grease on the outside of your reel. It's not a big deal, but just one less thing you have to do. Alright, so... Oh, I have to put my bearing back in there. I almost forgot about that. So put your bearing, just there's no certain way it goes. I'm going to put a little bit of that blue Daiwa, just a little tiny bit of that blue Daiwa oil. They're just enough to get it in there. I should add, so a lot of times this stays in. I actually forgot all about it. So this is your anti-reverse, like this is your anti-reverse bearing. So whenever it says like a reel says 7+1, 8+1, the +1 is always this anti-reverse bearing right here. Right there. So this goes in the sleeve. It's keyed. It's pretty obvious where it goes. Pow. Just right there, that's all. Alright, when you set this in here, it'll be concaved a little bit. I don't know if you can see that. Put the concave part in. Just kind of push it down with your pinky a little bit. It'll snap in there, and then you also grab your 10 millimeter socket. Oh, that's too big. Take a little screwdriver, just push down the little ends right here. Sits down like this. No, that's in there. It doesn't obstruct the bearing at all either. I did rearrange the parts here. This is from inside out, so this is that washer that goes on top of the bearing all the way through to the handle nut cover, which is the last thing we'll do. So I'll put these frame screws in and let's get to it. Speed all this stuff up. All right, now that the frame screws are in, make sure you put your little washer down. So these bearings, I'll show you guys real quick. So these two washers here, they're both bent. And it doesn't matter which way you bend them put them in, as long as they're not stacked on top of each other like this, where they kind of sandwich nice and neat together. So it doesn't matter if the two ends are touching or if just the middles are touching. Just put your drag clicking part right there. Put these two washers in. Make sure they're fully seated. Make sure this washer's on here too. And hold the drag clicking part right here. This is going to hold the spool shaft, the drive shaft from spinning. These are reverse thread as well. So what I do, I kind of twist it the wrong way on purpose, and it kind of seats down. And then you can twist it on just fine. That'll prevent you from cross threading. If it's going on super tight, then you're probably cross threading it, because it doesn't take much effort to get this down. You just get it snug. You don't have to get it super tight, but just snug. Just like that. Now the spring is what goes inside here. Just like that. Drag star on top of the spring. And when I hold it, see how it's kind of an oval right here? I hold on the opposite sides of the oval like this. And make sure you get it on the nut first. There you go. So now I hold on the opposite sides of the oval. And why I do that is when you put make sure that washer's on too. When you put the handle on, you put it right between your fingers like this. Hold on, let me get this washer on. You get it right between your fingers like this. It's a lot easier than trying to hold it the other way. And I just kind of swap my hands like this. And keep pressure down, just because that spring is compressed right now. And the same thing, I back it off for a second. Once it's seated, then I spin it. And with this, you're just going to get kind of snug for now. And so for your hole right here, one of the tips of this nut has to point toward it, or one of the flat sides. So I kind of after I get a finger tightened, I'll just kind of, if it makes sense to say, round it up to wherever it needs to go. So this will probably be a flat spot. So it's flat there. And that way it's going to line up with the hole right here. You drop your little screw in there. And I always get it kind of started with my thumb. I just kind of push down and gently twist it. And then you can take your screwdriver. Now don't spin your handle until you have your spool in, because your gears aren't fully able to get meshed up. This spool shaft here, that holds your pinion gear aligned, because once this part will go inside the bearing that we put in the side plate here, and it will align it all the way, so that way your pinion gear isn't going to be jumping around and causing issues. And when putting line in, I always like to leave a little bit of a tag. Grab the line, I'll pinch it, keep a little bit of tension on it as I pull it through. That way you don't get it caught up in the spool shaft or anything like that. Put your side plate back on. So that angle like that and pushes up. Then you can just finger tighten this. Some people tighten it down a lot. I just kind of use my thumb like this until I can't, and then I just use my nail a little bit. And that's good. I've never had that fall off at all. Drag somewhat smooth. So now you want to do a little functions check. Granted, I should have tape on my spool, but of course, listen for any sort of weird sounds. That sound you hear is just the line slapping the reel. Do a drag check. Back your drag all the way off. Okay. I'll do it a little bit more. Okay, that's working. Now engage your spool, disengage your spool, like almost like you're free spooling it. Okay, that's working. Twist the handle. It's all good to go. All right, hopefully this video helped you out how to maintain your Tatula SV. If that was a little bit too much for you, or you just don't have time, the tackle trap does do super tuning and also just general reel cleaning services. And also they are an authorized Daiwa warranty center, so you can check them out. They know what they're doing. And if you have any problems with your Tatula when you first get it, contact them and see if they can help you out with that. So subscribe, and also stay tuned for other. I'm going to be using this reel quite a bit for your general buzz baits, spinner baits, some top waters. It's all around kind of that medium to medium heavy stuff. So check that out if you want to see more on this. Thanks.